You're listening to a new episode of The Brave Technologist, and this one features Hamed Haddadi, who is the professor of human-centered systems at the Department of Computing at Imperial College London. In his industrial role, he is also the chief scientist at Brave Software, where he leads our research team. In this episode, we discuss the journey of the Brave research team, the importance of having a research team at Brave, the pairing of academia and industry, and why that's important in technology, different areas of research at Brave, and the importance of human-centered systems. Now for this week's episode of The Brave Technologist. Hamed, welcome to The Brave Technologist. How are you doing today?
Excellent. Thanks very much, Luke. How are you?
Good. I'm looking forward to having you on. So why don't we just set the table a little bit? Can you give us a little backstory on like how you ended up getting into what you're doing and what particular in your background kind of helped you get where you were or where you are?
Sure. So from childhood, I've grown up in a working family, and I've always been interested in building things, putting things together, and then I got into putting electronic circuits together and all of that. And I've always been fascinated by use of technology in everyday life, and so slowly that got me into doing more work on electronics and electronic engineering, and that gradually led me to computer science. And then I did a couple of degrees here in London and then in Cambridge on my PhD, generally in electronics engineering, telecommunications engineering, and then computer science. And I've always also had an interest in working in applied settings. So during my life, either as an undergraduate student or postgrad, I've always done internships and times at industry. So I worked in Sony, at Intel, in AT&T. I've spent time with Microsoft Research. So I've always been keen to basically keep my research and my scientific work as realistic as possible. And in the last 6 years, I've been working with Brave on developing latest research and technology for our users.
Awesome. How did you kind of get into working at Brave? Like, what's the backstory there?
Yeah, sure. So I am a professor at Imperial College London, and one of my colleagues at the time, Ben Lifshitz, was the chief scientist of Brave. So I spent some time working with him on privacy preserving advertising. And even before that, since about 15 years ago, I had been working in the space of private analytics, privacy in advertising, and also doing work on, for example, fraud detection in online advertising and generally the whole web. So I had engaged quite a bit with folks in this space, and slowly that led to me spending part-time work as a visiting professor for a while, and then I basically took the lead of the research team at Brave about 3 years ago.
And kind of what is kind of the work that you're doing in research at Brave, and why is it important that Brave has this research team?
That's an excellent question. Not many startups and not many even scale-ups can afford a research team, but many of them do this because the work that we do, for example, at Brave or companies like Brave, it's really at the cutting edge of science and technology. And sometimes the latest developments really need you to spend quite a bit of time doing experiments, developing stuff, and maybe kind of putting it out there in the community and seeing if the community accept that, whether, for example, if it's security protocols or privacy protocols. You cannot just roll out tech and hope for the best. You need to have open source code. You need to have done the research, have done the experiments, demonstrate that something works, and something can be audited, it can be verified. So especially in the space of machine learning, for example, you have topics like auditability, explainability, fairness, and then, for example, in security and privacy, you have to have verifiability. So this is a lot of the time of the research team is spent on developing latest technology and working closely with the scientific and academic community to make sure that this technology is it can be trusted basically before we roll it out to users.
And so you guys are basically like, have there been cases that where you all have kind of taken something from that research stage, like from a white paper or something like that, all the way to like it now being used in Brave that you could give as an example, just so people, I mean, because it's kind of cool because there's so many people are using the technology, right? Like, and yeah, it's kind of a neat thing.
Yeah, so there have been quite a few works, for example, on detecting latest ways of working against ad blockers or detecting malicious contents on a web page. So we've been working, for example, a product out of research called PageGraph has been in development for quite a few years in various iterations, going from looking at the objects on the web page and how they link together to form a graph, and looking into actual contents of, for example, JavaScript on pages. So that's one example. So in the ad blocking space, so how we fight basically, and this is a constant kind of a tug of war that the analytics industry or the ad industry tries to find new ways of tracking the users, new ways of placing cookies, and you kind of have to keep developing technology to defeat that. The other example is, for example, private analytics. In order to understand how people are using the browser, what sort of things break, what sort of things frustrate them, what sort of interactions do they have. For many browsers, this is very simple because they just collect every single action that the user take, and every single click is monitored, every single navigation is monitored, and all that data comes through. But for Brave, as a user first and as a private browser, this is really not an option. So we've been working for quite a few years on always having the best and latest and the most private analytics system possible in order to make sure that we do not have any way of, even for Brave, re-identifying users or even re-identifying small cohorts of users in different parts of the world or in different user cohorts. So these are just some of the examples. The same goes for using latest machine learning, for example, for detecting fraud on the web and detecting, for example, page breakages in a private manner.
Yeah, and you guys just released this Nebula. You said this Nebula release, right?
That's right.
That's on the privacy preserving analytics side, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So Nebula, for example, uses various levels of protections, including some previous work at Brave called STAR, which was also published in top security conferences, and that kind of ensures that small cohorts are basically not identifiable. And on top of that, what we do, we have Nebula, which uses differential privacy, which is a way of injecting just enough noise in a data set that basically you cannot, basically my presence or absence in the data set doesn't make a big difference. So in a way, I become kind of unidentifiable. So we've just rolled that out, and that's gone out to all the users, and that work has also been submitted for review at the top conference. So we do this all the time, and there will be similar efforts, for example, in new products that we will be developing.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's like, if I just look across the Brave stack of things, there's just a lot of different types of technology too. What technologies today like get you most excited, or are you guys putting a lot of focus on now?
So this space is really rapidly moving. So latest advances in cryptography, for example, in privacy protocols really let us do things that we couldn't necessarily do a few years ago. For example, rolling out really private and verifiable, for example, wallet, for example, or ad attributions, for example, or rolling out in terms of latest advances in machine learning. What we are doing is using the existing knowledge which is on the web and using the existing knowledge which is on our support, for example, data set and databases, and we can enable live interaction with the user when they have a support query, and we can automate that in a way that it relieves the pressure on the support team, for example, but it allows the user to really have detailed feedback on a specific action that they want to take in the browser. And hopefully, with things like on-device models and advances in RAGs, for example, we can look into even automating some of these tasks, so the user can just express in a natural language that I want to organize my tabs by topic, and all their tabs just automatically get organized for them, so they don't need to even click some buttons. So that's kind of the direction of that we are moving towards.
I know you, and you mentioned on-device models there, so I got to ask you about that because it's something
Sure.
like I've always been super, even from when we were doing, the advertising model at Brave, and trying to do this local device stuff. So much attention's on these like large language models in the AI space right now. What are some of the things that you guys are looking at for on-device modeling, and what are some of the challenges that you all are facing and trying to have us develop those at Brave?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, luckily there are a lot of good models being released openly at the moment, and there is a race between a few kind of large model providers in having the latest and the best models out. And on-device models are fascinating because they let you completely do things in a private manner. If you think about it, that if I can have, for example, think about a version of Leo or a version of other popular LLMs sitting locally on my machine. I can do all the analytics, all the AI tasks that I want to do, or even all my whatever email writing and email summarization and messaging and social media and whatever locally. So without all the privacy risks. The challenge here is that at the moment these are mostly quite big models, even in size. So the memory of a device at the end of the day, or the memory of a mobile phone, or even a desktop or a laptop, is limited. So I cannot ship for every single task. I cannot ship a 3 GB model to the user, because at some point their device is just going to be full and their battery is going to be drained in an hour. So they need to be constantly connected to a charger, like back in the days when we used to carry our chargers around with us. So these are some of the challenges. And of course, what happens is that usually, so think about search. So one of the nicest things that we have in Brave is like having our own private search engine. So think about, I want to do some interaction or I want to do some fact finding. The local model on the device, it might not necessarily have the latest news articles, for example, or the latest social media posts. So if I can augment that local model with the knowledge that comes live from search in a private manner, then I can do a lot more. So these are some of the exciting things that not only researchers at Brave, but also the search team together we are looking into.
That's awesome. That's really exciting to hear about, and yeah, I think people are looking forward to seeing how that goes. And I'm sure too, as devices kind of get better and better too over time, it'll open up more doors. But
Exactly.
yeah, and so there's a lot of discussion around like human-centered systems in the context of AI. Like how do you define that yourself, and then why is it kind of crucial for emerging tech to adopt this approach?
Yeah, I think for decades we've been basically building tech for various industries, for the advertising industry, for the surveillance industry, maybe even. And it's really important to think about where tech takes us next. And is this the direction that we want to go? What about the users? What about the human beings? And how would even the data collection and the analytics affects the user? So the fact that I show you certain media today, or the fact that I do some data collection, for example, from your browser or from your smartphone or your Internet of Things devices, and based on that, I make some decisions about you, putting you in a certain category, showing you certain social media posts, showing you certain news posts. That has an effect on you as a user, as a human being. And this affects our feelings, this affects the emotions that we go through as a human being. So we really have to think responsibly about where do we go next with technology, how will technology affect us as individuals and as a society as a whole. If done not carefully, we will really be in a dangerous situation. So it's important to kind of think about this. And I think, for example, Brave with a with a private approach and with a privacy first view really is taking a good step in this direction.
Yeah, I think how important is that collaboration kind of between academia and industry? I mean, you've given some good examples here of things we've done at Brave, but how about more broadly? Like, it
Yeah.
seems like there's a good link there, but maybe we can go into that a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of advances in, for example, latest technology these days come from industrial research labs, actually, because they have good availability of resources like hardware, GPUs, data centers, and all of that, which a university might not necessarily have. However, at at the end of the day, we need to educate always the next generation of researchers, the next generation of scientists and engineers. And also we need to, sometimes as an industry, our primary focus, for example, is optimizing for growth or optimizing for revenue. While when developing technology, we need to also think about other aspects of technology. Is it fair? How much bias is this tech introducing in our users or in our society? How do I take accountability into this whole equation? What about inclusion, for example? So I think collaboration between academia and industry allows us really to develop fascinating, really blue sky and deep and large projects and research, while having kind of a sanity check on is this the right direction? Is this what I should be developing, basically?
Yeah, and you mentioned inclusion there, and some of these fairness and things like that. In your last answer, like, what are some of the biggest challenges you see in kind of ensuring ethical AI development goes forward, both in academia and in the industry, and kind of like in those relationships?
Yeah, 5 years ago, if you'd asked me this, I would have been very disappointed and really kind of, I wouldn't have had a good view towards this whole space. But I think things have changed a lot, thanks to both academics and researchers and industry researchers, and also just global think tanks and charities and all of that. So we are thinking more about, okay, what is the impact of this surveillance mechanism that we are developing, this whatever offensive tech that somebody is developing, and how do we defend against, for example, cyber attacks and things like that. So, and also even at a larger scale, even things that come around these days, for example, ethical hacking and all of that, which is, I mean, this is a very complicated space, and different views are there. But I think it's good that we are discussing these things and we are thinking about these things while developing technology nowadays. And the challenges sometimes is really identifying the damage that a specific technology can introduce before rolling it out to millions and millions of users. So that's really important, I think.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think kind of on that note too, I mean, we're seeing more and more kind of steps in the policy making space too. Are you seeing a lot of engagement between academia and policymakers, and how do you feel about kind of the pace of how that's going from your point of view?
Mhm. Traditionally, it's not been easy, for example, for academia and industry to talk to governments and policymakers. But I think in the last few years, even the availability of new tech like social media, blog posts, and platforms like that has enabled more kind of real time and more interactive engagement between these various stakeholders, including user groups, actually. which now can be vocal, and they can get their voices heard. So I think really going forward, this space will hopefully be improved. However, it's always important, maybe even so. Technology is not there to police the society. However, uh, technology can help with bringing more transparency into the ways that things are happening in the society, and it can just be an eye, basically, or a kind of a watchtower for what's going on. But that really the challenge, I think, that we are facing is going to be determining what incentives these different actors have in the space, all the way from industries, for example, engaging in standardization efforts, or industries engaging in rolling out tech for governments, and or simply complying with various government requirements that, okay, as a social media company or as a browser company or as whatever, do I enable access to user data? And luckily at Brave, we don't have this problem, because from design and from beginning, we've been thinking about this in order to just don't collect any user data, make sure the user has been put first and their privacy is intact. But yeah, I think this is going to be really a complicated space that a lot of the big techs and AI companies will be seen also as a gatekeeper, basically, in terms of having a lot of data and also being able to reach to millions and billions of users. So I think this is going to be an interesting and challenging space.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, especially like when you consider how embedded the technology is becoming kind of at that device level, how much does that kind of concern you now when you start to see things like, the AI that's integrated in the browser is integrated in in your operating system, right? That you're kind of, it all seems to get much more closer to that user. Like, are you seeing, like, are you concerned at all about the amount of data that's going back into these clouds by these, like, devices and users and all that?
Yeah, so we do a lot of experiments in my research lab, also at the university. We do a lot of experiments on inspecting the data that leaves the various, for example, smart home devices or wearable devices. And there is a lot of data going to many destinations that we don't even know where they are, like hard-coded IP addresses, dynamic DNS points, and like basically unknown locations. And this is really the concern. And I think the governments and many tech providers, many larger tech providers, for example, are kind of acting together to develop some regulations and some standards to start preventing this. Because I think in the last 10 years, the technology has been really rapidly growing, but without many checks and kind of balances in place that, okay, is this ethical? Where is this data going? Do I need consent from the user? Or can I, 10 years later, just go to the user saying, oh, we've been collecting your data and now we are going to train our next model with it. And by the way, your face might be in that data set or whatever. So I think, I think there's definitely concern here. And this is where industry, academia, regulatory bodies, they really need to work closely together to make sure that the potential damages are prevented before kind of going at a much larger scale.
Mm-hmm. And so, like, looking out, next 5 to 10 years, how do you think the human-centered AI will impact society, especially with how rapidly things are advancing at this pace?
Yeah, I think this is really an interesting but a very hard question. I think the the incentives that we see from different kind of large corporations, for example, the big tech, around data collection, not only for advertising or not only for enabling kind of larger models to be built, but also for, let's say, collaborating with governments for surveillance, or simply obliging to various government requirements. around the world for various levels of data collection. I think this will have an impact in the society in terms of, for example, citizen rights, human rights, and being able to have the democratic processes in place. And we've already seen some of the effects of these in recent, for example, political campaigns around the world, elections, and all of that. So I think at least one thing that's happening is that we have more awareness of the risks that such rapid advancements in technology can have. And this education and this awareness hopefully will let us overcome some of the challenges that in the last 5 to 10 years we were just unaware of. But I think we need to keep developing, we need to keep building interesting stuff, or we need to think about user privacy. How will on-device models, for example, help preventing leaving, basically just letting data out there, and things like that. I think there's hope, but we need to work hard.
Awesome. And before we kind of wrap things up too, I think it'd be kind of interesting for folks to get a sense, like, so you have this research team at Brave, right? What are the different areas of focus of the team? Like, how's the team kind of broken up across, the research and development? If you could give us a bit of a snapshot of that.
Sure. So the research team is formed mostly of folks working in the space of privacy, cryptography, machine learning, and security. So they closely interact with product teams across different levels, for example, developing new product lines, or sometimes if there are specific challenges that a product line faces and it needs kind of a more complicated approach or a more kind of experimental approach sometimes to see if they can find a solution to the challenges. So usually the researchers engage directly with various product teams, and we try to make sure that we both have open science and we openly publish papers, and we put our, for example, if we design a new analytic system like Nebula, or if we design a new cryptography system, we, for example, for fraud detection, we put these things out there for the society, for the research community to be able to vet and audit and go through. And also it's a contribution overall to the scientific community. Even though we have a small team of researchers, we try to make sure that our impact is beyond just Brave as a company, and we want to make sure that we contribute to the wider scientific community as well. And we also have an internship program, so every year we get several PhD students who come and spend 3 months, mostly in the summer, with us, and that helps us interact more and engage more also with academia as well.
Awesome. Is there anything we didn't cover that you want the audience to know about, or anything that? Yeah.
Nothing specific. Just that we are always open to discussing latest advancements in science, to new experiments, to new feature requests from the audience, from the users, and we are always happy to hear new ideas. The crazier they are, maybe the more exciting they will be.
Awesome. Well, Hamed, I really appreciate you taking the time to join us here today. Where can people find you if they want to follow along with your work or where you're posting online?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we have a brave.com/research webpage where we put all our papers and all our code and all of that. And also on social media, I am at RealHamed, so I'm on X and LinkedIn and all of that. But it's relatively easy to find me.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much, Hamed. I really appreciate it. Love to have you back too at some point to kind of go over any new stuff that you all release and want people to know about.
Thank you very much. Have a great
all
day.
Right. Have a good one. Thanks for listening to the Brave Technologist podcast. To never miss an episode, make sure you hit follow in your podcast app. If you haven't already made the switch to the Brave browser, you can download it for free today at brave.com. and start using Brave Search, which enables you to search the web privately. Brave also shields you from the ads, trackers, and other creepy stuff following you across the web.